Good morning. Our readings today come from the 24th Sunday in Ordinary Time. From the book of Sirach. Wrath and anger are hateful things, yet the sinner hugs them tight. The vengeful will suffer the Lord's vengeance, for he remembers their sins in detail. Forgive your neighbor's injustice, that when you pray your own sins will be forgiven. Could anyone nourish anger against another and expect healing from the Lord? Could anyone refuse mercy to another like himself? Can he seek pardon for his own sins? If one who is but flesh cherishes wrath, who will forgive his sins? Remember your last days. Set enmity aside. Remember death and decay, and cease from sin. Think of the commandments. Hate not your neighbor. Remember the Most High's covenant, and overlook faults. The word of the Lord. A second reading from Paul's letter to the Romans. Brothers and sisters, none of us lives for oneself, and no one dies for oneself. If we live for the Lord. And if we die for the Lord. So then whether we live or die, we are the Lord's. This is why Christ died and came to life, that he might be Lord of both the dead and the living. The word of the Lord. The Lord be with you. Reading from the Holy Gospel according to Matthew. Peter approached Jesus and asked him, Lord, if my brother sins against me, how often must I forgive? As many as 7 times? Jesus answered, I say to you, not 7 times, but 77 times. This is why the kingdom of heaven may be likened to a king who decided to settle accounts with his servants. When he began the accounting, a debtor was brought before him who owed him a huge amount. Since he had no way of paying it back, his master ordered him to be sold, along with his wife, his children, and all his property, in payment of the debt. At that the servant fell down, did him homage, and said, Be patient with me, and I will pay you back in full. Moved with compassion, the master of that servant let him go and forgave him the loan. When that servant had left, he found one of his fellow servants who owed him a much smaller amount. He seized one of his fellow servants and started to choke him, demanding, Pay back what you owe. Falling to his knees, his fellow servant begged him, Be patient with me, and I will pay you back. But he refused. Instead, he had the fellow servant put in prison till he paid back the debt. Now when his fellow servants saw what had happened, they were deeply disturbed and went to their master and reported the whole affair. His master summoned him and said to him, You wicked servant, I forgave you your entire debt because you begged me to. Should you not have had pity on your servant as I have had pity on you? Then in anger his master handed him over to the torturers until he should pay back the whole debt. So will my heavenly Father do to you, unless each of you forgives your brother from your heart. The Gospel of the Lord. The book of Psalms talks about the Lord being merciful, gracious, and slow to anger. I don't know about you, but I have met a number of people in my life who are angry. And I'm not just talking about anger about one thing, but constant anger. They're angry about everything. They're angry about politics. They're angry about life. They're angry about their job. They're angry at their parents. The anger doesn't stop. I've been in traffic jams, and I look over in some of the other cars, and I've seen at times someone in another car screaming and yelling because of the traffic jam. I'm happy the windows were up. And you know what? After you finish screaming and yelling, you're still in a traffic jam. The book of Sirach has to be known that Sirach did not believe in an afterlife. But what he's talking about is that anger is an abomination. And he asks his readers to take a look at your end time and the corruption that you will face when you die. And instead, focus on God's commandments and how we should treat others. Paul believed in an afterlife. And while Sirach believed that treating people in this life will bring you rewards now, Paul believed that being good to your neighbor, being kind to others, and being merciful will give you a special judgment at the end time. We need to look at this concept of anger and the concept of forgiving. Peter is asking Jesus a question, but the question is interesting. How often must I forgive my brother? But what Sirach and Peter are talking about in Jesus' day, they believed even in the title, the concept that you must forgive your neighbor, that your neighbor was a fellow Jew, nobody else. Jesus changes that whole concept. 7 was kind of a perfect number for Jesus' day, and I kind of agree with that, because 7 was Mickey Mantle's number. But Jesus changes that sense, not just 7 times, which is perfection, but 77 times. And there's some translations that say 70 times. You can translate it either way. What Jesus is saying is, you forgive not just a few times, but always and forever. We need to know, people, that whoever we meet, whoever we pass, whoever crosses our life, we need to treat them with mercy and kindness and compassion. From St. Francis' song, when we pardon, we are also pardoned by God. God bless. Have a good week.